Dude, I'm excited about this. I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. When did we last chat? Like, I feel like because you brought out the episode with me not that long ago, but we talked
like 3
a
weeks
long
ago,
time ago, right?
Yeah, it was like the end of last year or something.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. It's like, gosh, it has been like, I reckon 5 months or so since we've chatted. So I'm looking forward to catch up. I'm looking forward to hearing more of your journey. And yeah, this will be good. Really good. How are you doing for time?
All right. I got nothing but time.
Okay, cool. It's evening for you, right?
Yeah. I just got home from work, so all good.
Sweet. You on the West Coast? Like,
Nah. All of Australia, we're all East Coasters, except people in Perth.
right. That's for some reason I had you placed in Perth.
Nah.
I don't know if it's. Do you know what? I'm going to throw it out there. Having spent not that much time in Australia, I think people from Perth are cooler, and I think that's what it is. No, I know that's a very controversial statement. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's probably just because I only got exposed to 100 people in each location and little samplings here and there. But yeah, I liked the people I was around in Perth. I was like, these guys are cool.
Yeah,
really,
keep that under
really
your hat in the rest of Australia.
I'll let people know when I come in next time at the customs.
You should be like, by the way, Perth people are cool. We're kind of a bit anti-Perth at the moment because they've just shut their borders completely, and like my brother's there and we can't go and visit, and they've just like their own countryed it kind of thing.
Wow.
And so we're kind of like, oh,
Intense.
bloody Perth. Like they think it's half of Australia. It's such a, so.
That is funny. It's such a weird country, right? I mean, like, it's just this giant, it's like a donut. There's just nothing in the middle, and then there's a couple of things around the edge.
That's right.
And even then, most of the edge, completely desolate as well.
That's right. The East Coast is kind of where it's at, but then once you get past Brisbane, it's a bit of nothing until you get, a bit of nothing for the rest of it. Everyone in Darwin's like, oh, yeah, I'm here. No.
Yeah. Well, and I haven't done much of Australia as well. I loved Sydney, and I was in Brisbane for a bit as well. I loved that, and so I loved all of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think the thing that hit me hard was I'd just been to New Zealand, the year before, and New Zealand is cool. I think New Zealand,
Australia though.
Dude, I know. I'm just hitting you right where it hurts over and over and over.
I know.
East Coast sucks, but at least it's not as bad as
New Zealand's better.
Australia as a whole, just not that good. No, I love I think New Zealand felt more like England to me, and I've been living in America, and I was just like, this feels like coming home. Whereas Australia is so big still. It still feels like America. It's like British people with their vibe, kind of cool, chill.
Yeah.
But infrastructure was still very America, and I was like, "Wow, this just feels big and large, and it doesn't compute with this culture of like chilled out vibe people that are kind of British in a lot of ways, but not at all because you're driving on 4-lane highways. Like, what's that? We don't have 4-lane highways.
No, you don't, eh?
Yeah, weird part of the world, the UK.
Australia's like America light, I think. We wish we were America, despite how much our culture doesn't like Americans, but politically
it's moving
I
that way, right?
I think we copy. We look around the world and we're like, which country should we follow? The innovative ones, Norway, Sweden, even New Zealand. They're like, nah, Trump. Let's follow him. That's our politics anyway. We're like, yes.
Hold on, guys. There's this orange guy over there.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the one.
Right. He gives our conservative politicians like a lot of license. So if they're beating him, we look good. Like as long the bar's so low. Like they won't openly support him, but they kind of give license. Our conservative politicians are kind of took his playbook now. Now they're going, oh, that's fake news, and they're going to our ABC, like Australian broadcaster, the public one, like BBC.
Yeah.
In the media now, they're just saying like, oh, we all know you're left leaning, blah blah blah, like full attack in the media. I'm like, that's direct from playbook of Donald Trump, you idiots. Like, and it works. I guess, it
does work. It works really well because that hard left position, as much as there's a lot of people there and there's a lot of people left in general, most people don't like the hard left. And so if you can actually focus on hating the hard left, it's better than actually trying to win some of the people on the right, right? Because you actually club together all the centralists, all the people on the right now are on your side. If you just go, well, look at those dicks. That's how Trump won. I don't think he was intelligent enough to know that's what he was doing, maybe. But it was because he was like, look at these extreme liberals. And everyone was like, yeah, we do hate those people.
I'm always like, do you actually know any? Like, this is the thing. I'm like, have you ever met one of these
in America?
Extreme leftists?
There's very few.
I'm like, in life, I'm like, have you ever come across someone that's like, effing, I want communism? Like, I've never, like, yeah, bring back no public property. Like, I don't think anyone, where do these people exist? I don't know, but. Yeah.
Well, if you listen to America, every single socialist country is, that's
right.
all there is.
Australia, we're far left. Like that's right.
It's amazing, right? Because they'll say things like, "Oh, well, look at England, look at Australia," and I'm like, "Guys, you do know that they're like the closest behind you and using you as a model to try and slowly eradicate any kind of like progressive movement in their country."
Yeah, look at all those countries beating us on like happiness and health and well-being, and we don't want to be them. Oh, they suck.
It's such a bizarre world. It's so interesting. Have you come across perceptiongap.us? It's an interesting website.
No.
So what they do is they do there's a test you can do. It's largely for Americans, but it's interesting to do anyway, I guess. But basically what they did initially was they kind of closed it off and did a specific grouping. And they basically ask a whole bunch of Republicans, where do you stand on all these different issues? And then they ask them, where do you think Democrats stand? And then they do it with Democrats, vice versa. Where do you stand and where do you think Republicans stand? And so what they have is the hard data of like, here's where Republicans generally are, and here's where Democrats generally are, and here's where they think each other are. And the gap just like grows insane, you know? And most of them are kind of in the same place on most issues. Like most of them kind of agree, Democrats and Republicans, it turns out. And actually they just think the other person is an insane monster and therefore... You know, and so it's really interesting. It's like what you're saying. Where is this extreme liberal? Okay, a whole bunch of people showed up and stormed a Capitol building or whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, how many people actually, out of the 360 million people, stormed the Capitol? You know what I mean? Like, there's not that many people that are that nuts. Most people that are Republican are just kind of like some random guy that's just, you know, working a job and he's got a family and he goes to church and he's like, I'm supposed to report, I'm Republican. I'm kind of a bit more conservative. You know, I really would rather a little bit less taxation and, you know, I've got my own business. I don't want it to be like too stymied by the government. Like that's the regular Republican, not like, let's take the, you know, let's kill AOC, like, or whatever, you know.
That's right. Let's kill AOC, yeah.
But that's who every Democrat thinks of when they think of a Republican, and then vice versa, right?
That's right.
Every Republican thinks of someone that's literally trying to, like, with their, like, you know, sickle, like, take out the, you know, American dream.
Right. Have you read Richard Raw's latest book? I think it's a reworking of an older one, the Wisdom Tradition. I think he's just dropped.
No.
I was just reading that, and that's an interesting one because he talks political, and that's what he says. He's like, he critiques the progressives and then he critiques conservatives, and that's what he says. He's like, each side holds up the worst of each side to justify their position and why they should be that way to the other. And it's like, once again, the extreme positions, there's still a minority on either end, but we hold them up and go, see, like, Republicans are crazy because of this nut job QAnon Trump guy. And then it's like, but most Republicans don't sit there. Yeah, that's right.
It's such an interesting thing. This hammers down to like who you are and what you do, though, right? I mean, to a nutshell, like looking at these kind of extremes and everything in the middle. And so I'll probably include most of this conversation.
Okay.
But let's dive in a bit more. Konrad, tell me a bit about yourself. I mean, a lot of people have been exposed. I've shared your stuff quite a bit, and I know a lot of people are following you and tracking with you. I know you have a high turnover, though, because you managed to piss off one side or the other with the kind of wild, extreme guests you have. But I think a lot of people will know a bit about you and what you're doing. But can you kind of give like a little bit of an overview about who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it?
Well, my name's Konrad. I'm from Australia. I currently have a hobby podcast called Artist Digest. And the goal of that, my goal is to I just want to connect with people that like exploring ideas. And I think these ideas we hold shape us. And they shape us in the ways we interact with politics, religion. And when you come across someone who's just the complete opposite to you, whether they're politically opposite, different religion, different something, my goal is to work out where did they deviate from me or from you as you're listening. It's like, if you are a hard pro-Trumper, I'm like, well, listen, let's be honest, I'm not. But there's an idea that you hold, that you accept. There's a way you see the universe that at some point we deviate. At some point, you accept an idea I reject. And so the goal of the podcast is to try and encounter ideas that different, extreme, controversial, that divide people, but try and dig down into what's their worldview, what's their life experience, and what has happened to them in their life for them to end up where they are. And I feel like if I can, I'm just interested in exploring that idea. So like you said, people will come on board as I talk to like a Rob Bell or something, and he'll come on. Everyone's like, I love Rob Bell, real progressive, it's real good. And then the next week I have I had like an elderly lady who was like critiquing progressive Christianity, and you see the numbers just kind of drop off, and I'm like, nah, like it's actually
all the
more
people
fun.
that you gained from Rob Bell suddenly lose because I don't like this guy. It's not Rob Bell.
That's right. We're so used to listening to something that's, and I think you see it in meme culture and just anything you follow, you like, you engage, and you share things that you agree with, and that's what the algorithm does. That's what we're programmed to do. That's why my podcast, not that successful. That's why I tell myself, because it's we share and engage with things that we agree with, that we enjoy, that reflect our worldview, or that attack somebody else, and we can build a tribe around it. And so every week, if I talk to somebody of a completely different tribe, I'll get people going, oh, I don't like this at all. And that's the space I'm trying to occupy. I'm doing my best to come across challenging perspectives for me and for everybody, because it's, when you're listening to someone you completely disagree with, it's very uncomfortable. And it's like eating your vegetables. You bloody should eat your vegetables, and they're good for you. And you say you will, and you say you value it. But when it comes down to click and play on that podcast with that lady that you completely disagree with, that pro-Trumper that you think is nuts, can you get through an hour of me not debating him, but like probing? I'll try and dig a bit deeper. I'll push the position a little bit, but I'm not going to be like, mate, you're clearly wrong for X, Y, and Z, probably because I'm not qualified or intelligent enough to actually do it. But just to try and understand their worldview and trying to find out their humanity. There's a person behind there. Some trauma, some experience, something has led them to hold on to something that's controversial or helpful, because there's lots of people with very helpful ideas. And I'm just trying to find out the person that's, because when we divide over an issue, agree, disagree, you're an idiot because you think this, there's still that's people we're dividing over. That's people we're casting out. And my optimistic worldview is that I think if I had their life experience, I'd probably be the same. So I'm like, so let me find out what I've missed in my life experience. I'm over here and you're over there. I don't know if that that explains.
That's so amazing.
Where I am the podcast.
I love it. It's great, and I love your podcast, and I love the idea, because I'm the sort of person that does want to seek out someone that thinks very differently and go, what's this person about? Like, why do they think that? Like, how do they follow the same set of rules, how do they grow up in the same country? How do they read the same Bible? How do they, whatever it is. And yet at some point they just go, I'm off there. Like, that's it. I found something. And you're like, I didn't find that. What the hell are you on? And yet that's what people are thinking about you, right? So people are like, God, this guy's a nut job. And it's fascinating, right? Because people will still think that of you. Going, well, hold on, that's a very gracious position to take. But ultimately, we all know that person's just crazy. And you shouldn't be giving them time on air. You shouldn't be even...
Yeah, I've gotten that,
Just the fact that you're not attacking them and, setting them up to fail on your podcasts and clearly, proving them wrong. You're giving out, room to, the wrong kind of ideas. Like, people have these kind of very different perspectives. And I think creating room for them to be fleshed out are so... it's just so interesting. I'm trying to get some people, because there's a lot of stir up about deconstruction right now. I'm trying to get some people, maybe someone from the Gospel Coalition. They're writing a book about how dangerous the deconstruction is. I want to get some people and I go, tell me, why do you think...
How are you going with that?
Oh, terribly, because
it's bad.
Generally speaking, what's interesting, let me ask you this. Who is most likely to buy into your type of podcast? Because I found, because I'm not the sort of platform that gives voice to lots of different positions, I'd love to, but I've struggled to get one particular position to come on board at all. I think if I was, though, I think the other side wouldn't be actually all that willing. So it's very easy for me to go, well, look at all these progressive deconstructing Christians and, spiritual people that are off trying and exploring new spiritualities. They're all very open and they come and talk to me. But it's like, no, because I keep talking to those people, they're like, oh, yeah, I want to be on the same podcast as that person or that person or that person because I'm like them. Yeah. But I think actually if I had John Piper the week before, they'd be like, fuck this guy, I'm out. I'm not going on the same thing. So, but I wonder, have you seen, is there certain people that are more open to kind of sitting down with you and having these conversations.
Oh, definitely. Like, I think you've nailed the need. Well, that's right. Like, I've had a big line of deconstructed progressive, like yourself, like people who've unpacked this box of Christianity. That's kind of the rabbit hole I've started in. And I want to move into Buddhism and Islam and just any ideas in general. But this is kind of where I've started. And once you start the rabbit hole of deconstruction, there's a lot of people who are really open and willing to talk honestly and share their journey. And my hypothesis is that because if you're deconstructing, you've gone through a lot of trauma to leave your group, your community, and it's a big, difficult step. And once you do that, you're like, well, I don't care. I'll post on Instagram. I'll be open and honest. But what I found is maybe what you're finding as well is that it's very difficult to get people of the I don't know, how do you label these people? Like conservative or traditional or conventional, like the last very mainline Protestantism, let's say right now. It's hard to get like these mainline pastors or even people that critique. Like I'm trying to, Victoria just passed banning gay conversion therapy in Victoria. I think there's nuance to the bill. I haven't really gone into it. It's like, does it overreach in certain areas? I'm not really there for that debate, but there are people who are like okay with it and people who are opposed to it. And I reached out to one woman who's going to come on the show who's gay and a Methodist pastor or a pastor. And I was like, oh, geez, that church is more progressive than I thought it was. And she was picked up by the newspaper and she wrote in there going, yeah, I think this bill would probably be a good thing for X, Y, and Z reasons. And then I came across another guy from the same denomination critiquing her, being like, she doesn't represent our position. I can't believe this, blah, blah, blah. So I reached out to both of them and she has come on and she's going, yeah, I'd love to talk. I'm open to it. Like, share my journey. Really great. Reached out to this guy multiple times being like, mate, you said that you were annoyed you weren't involved in this newspaper article sharing your view. Come on the show. Just nothing, like crickets. And so there's this, the conservative worldview is very hard unless we're talking about like, I've found like the hard right position, like the really conservative. I've got like a Southern Baptist, like this guy was a lovely guy to talk to. I can't remember what episode. I think it's like Women Can't Be Pastors or something. And he was just there, just being like, yep. And this is why women can't be pastors for this book and this reading. And we're just having a great time going. So tell me how you get there. And he was a great guy to talk to, but he was convicted. He believed it and he was okay to be pushed on it. Whereas between him and the deconstructed people or the more progressive arm of, I'm just talking Christianity at the moment, there's this gap in the middle where I think...
Big window, right?
Pastors, like you're more conservative, but not that hard line. They're not going to come on and say, no, women can't be pastors. They'll dance around it a little bit. They'll be like, well, listen, like we're not opposed to women in ministry and ordinations. And, there's the more middle ground. They're the people I find impossible to get on the show. Yeah.
Do you think there's a component of, I think you're not going to have a problem getting like Ben Shapiro to tell you that he thinks, whatever, women should stay in the kitchen or some sort of like outlandish hard right person, right?
Yeah.
That's not
a problem. You can get them.
Yeah. But there's a thing about, and he's not worried about what his image will be because his image is being that person, right? You can't, if you're on the hard left going, look at this guy, he's just... XYZ, right? Whatever you might label someone like Ben, he seems like a nice guy, so I'm not gonna,
well, does he?
kill him. Well, I think
I'm sure if I sat down,
I've listened to some long form interviews, not snippets of him, but like interviews that are like 2-3 hours long.
Yeah, I'll give him credit for that. Yeah, I've heard some good interviews.
He seems like a nice guy. Like he knows what he's doing, and he knows he's a bit of an ass, and he knows
but don't you think that makes him worse? Because
in some ways,
he knows what he's doing.
I'm not saying that he's a good guy, but it does seem like he seems like someone I could sit down and have a pint with for a couple hours and chat with and be like,
I'd have a great time.
I think we'd have a decent conversation because I think his hard right position. I actually think on the whole he'll come back and go, yeah, I know, like it's probably not as extreme as that, but I think that's an important point, or that's an extreme example of this point, but it shows that you can't take it extremely the other way or whatever. So, but the point being, like someone like that is not worried about being misrepresented or cancelled. Because their whole platform is being the extreme nut job, right? You know what I mean? Like, or however you perceive him, but that's it, right? He's only going to get another, million views when he this Ben Shapiro destroys, X, Y, or Z.
That's
who
right.
cares? But the person that's just a kind of maybe more kind of central right, maybe conservative, maybe the person I was describing at the beginning, guy that runs his own business, goes to church, has voted Republican his whole life, is very unfamiliar with people of different race, of different sexualities, because he lives in maybe a rural town where that's not as common or as prevalent, and so he's probably not explicitly racist, explicitly sexist or whatever, but probably a lot of implicit sexism and racism and all these different things built in of the culture he's grown up in. That guy thinks, I'm coming on a show to discuss my position, which is maybe quite well thought out and quite considerate given his context. I'm not saying it's the right position. I'd probably argue very strongly that it isn't, because I'm some weird lefty nutjob from the UK, right? But I think that person is terrified of being Ben Shapiro, of being labeled that, and of being cancelled, and of everyone turning on them as some extremist, or people assuming they're racist and sexist and being called that, especially because they don't understand that, God, I'm racist. Phil Drysdale is racist. I will say it like loud, because I have stuff I'm still figuring out and working on and noticing in my day-to-day where I go, gosh, there's something there that I need to be working on. And so that's paired with me being driven to be anti-racist. But yeah, sure, I've got some racism in me that I've grown up for 30 years in a culture that's quite racist. But someone that's maybe in a more rural town is exposed to kind of that kind of concept. They just think, oh my God, you think I dress up in a white cloak and I'm lynching people and doing horrific... And it's like, no, there's a whole world here that you're not maybe aware of. But that's what they're scared of. They're scared of these extreme kind of labels. They're scared of being put in one camp or the other almost. And so it feels like the central kind of like this central thing that runs through our culture, which is really broad and is probably like 75% of people, right? Where you've got maybe like 10 and 15% on either side or something like that. But like really the vast majority are somewhere in this middle bit where they're kind of going, I don't want to really overly stick my head above the parapet, because this feels like a dangerous playing ground and someone's going to try and lop it off for their crusade, one side or the other. I often wonder about stuff like that as well. And I wonder if you're maybe bumping into something like that with someone like this. He's like maybe a bit more middle ground. And yeah, he's taken a position that would be considered the right or the conservative or the conventional or whatever. But he doesn't want to be like I'm not out there like, trying to bomb gay clubs or I'm just some guy that's reading my Bible and I really honestly think I don't think it's okay and I don't know what to do with that, and sometimes I feel bad about it, but I don't want to say that because then the people on my side will think I'm and so he's got so much to lose just being this kind of normal kind of I don't know, regular Christian guy, Christian pastor that thinks being gay is wrong. Like, shock horror, have you noticed that that's the default position for Christian pastors? Like, of course he does.
Yeah, I wonder if like there's this. It's hard to say because I've just got a few operating theories as I come across different as I'm like I really want to diversify. I don't want to have just the. I don't want to represent the best of one side and the worst of another. I'm like I want to engage with the best of that side and find out what's actually true in the conservative worldview. And I think Richard Rohr in this book that I was telling you about. The wisdom pattern or wisdom tradition, that he really talks about that. Like, what is the conservative really pushing for? And I think one hypothesis I have is that, and let's just stick within Christianity this is the rabbit hole I've dived down recently. You've got this worldview that says, like, you're either with me or against me. And I had one lady on my show who kind of was new to the show and was gracious enough to come on and tell us what's wrong with the show. And she was a Christian and she was like, the problem with your show is that you don't say what you believe. And the problem with your show is you don't end it and speak for the gospel. And I'm, classic, just like, oh, define the gospel. And what do you mean by that? And that was the problem because I don't openly stand for anything. And I think that's the worldview is if I don't openly stand for something, I had a pro-Trumper, and if I don't sit there and say, mate, you are racist, you are destroying the fabric of democracy, you are not a Christian at all. If I don't, like, part of our society seems to expect that. And it's not just this subgroup I'm talking about, but I think this conventional Christian subgroup is like, if you're not openly in my corner, then you're not in my corner. And when they look at, I guess, the catalog going, oh, Rob Bell, all these progressives, Phil Drysdale, not that guy. And they go, I can't, like, he's clearly a lefty, or he's clearly like questioning and rocking the boat. So I don't want to be a part of that. And so I think that's part of it. It's like you're either with me or against me mentality that I think it happens like, so to move from, you know, the conservative religious critique to the progressive left critique. Like I did an episode with a bloke, you'd probably be familiar being in the UK, Pete Evans. He's a celebrity chef, and he's he pops up in the tabloids all the time, and he just gets attacked because he's like anti-vaxxer, pretty conspiracy theorist, QAnon, and when I posted, like I put that video on YouTube, and it just cops either this interviewer is such an idiot, Pete Evans is on a complete other level, he just doesn't get it, or I get these guys are both idiots, I can't believe he's given a platform, like what, like, because I'm not once again with this. And yeah, I can take the argument, and I've had this discussion of like, yeah, he's promoting like things not backed by peer-reviewed science, and you know, do I police that and go, oh, you can't listen to this because you might not want to get vaccinated, or whatever the danger might be. But because I'm not up there having him and then going, well, Pete, you're completely wrong on X, Y, and Z, there's a contingent of the far left that are like, I can't believe you gave him a platform, this is the worst thing ever. Like, and then, I mean, it's a good debate to have, like, what ideas do you have to have prerequisites, all that kind of stuff. But there's still that element of tribalism within all these ideas. And when you go to the edges, or some people just have that with me or against me mentality for whatever reason. I think that's it's hard to get that on the show. I've found.
Yeah. I mean, you are in a place that is problematic, because I love what you do, and I love stuff like that. Like I love just looking at interesting kind of people and ideas, and not. And having, I mean, you have an incredible gift. I mean, I am in awe of it, because it's very hard to talk to someone you disagree with and probe them for more information without subtly going, you're a fucking nut job, mate, or whatever, right? Like it's very hard. I'm really impressed. I don't know if that's maybe a skill you've developed, or if you've always kind of had that, like, how do you even go about, like, you're sitting down with someone that you so strongly disagree. I mean, the ego has got to be going, Konrad, like, this guy, you gotta, like, put him in, there's got to be a little bit in you that's got that hard left position, quote unquote, like, where you're going, I can't put this online, people should not hear this guy, or whatever, right? There's got to be something in you. How do you quiet that voice and go, yeah, but if I ask this question, he's going to go even more nuts, and it's going to be so interesting. Like, or whatever. Or if I ask this question, I can figure out, where did he develop that idea, and where's it coming from? And then people might have a bit more empathy for him as a human. Or like, how do you go about that internal kind of like dialogue as you're talking to someone that you strongly disagree with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot can be said for having a podcast and a camera, and having a formalized space where I'm like, this is the format of a show, this is what I do. So I'm trying to be true to the platform or what I'm trying to create. So in my everyday life, there's no way I'm actually, you'll listen to an episode and be like, man, Konrad's so enlightened. Definitely not the case. I'm always like, Dad, you're so wrong on X, Y, and Z. I can't believe you voted for them. And I'll try and convince him every single time. But when I pause and think about it in my most thoughtful moments, I think it comes from, and this is what the show was built around, is this idea that I don't actually think I can change anybody's mind on anything. I've tried for so long, and no matter, I always thought, if I perfect the argument, if I have the best data points, and I've experimented over the years being like, but what if I was to present you with this piece of data, and you just see people, and especially now in the age of fake news, they're like, that's fake news, that's biased, that's not true. And you see, it's like, I actually can't convince you. So if that's off the table, if I'm now not talking to you just to convince you, well, the only thing left is for me to understand you. And so then I try and this is not my default, it's my more thoughtful position. It's like, if I'm just trying to assume the best of people, going, you're quite a racist pro-Trumper, but I bet there's reasons for that. I bet you've had an experience. I bet you've had an encounter. I bet you've been in an economic position. I bet something has happened. I bet a worldview has been painted for you that's resonated on a deeper level, and you've had to accept these premises. And if I accepted that premise, I'd probably think Trump was a great solution as well. Yeah. But I differ here, and here. So it's like, a combination of like, I can't convince them. If I can just see the best in them and go, you know what, like there is a reason for this. They're not an irrational idiot. And maybe some people are. I haven't come across too many where that I talk to. I find well thought out reasons. And so I try and assume the best. But when you say like the ego battle, there are still things. So there are some things that I'm quite comfortable with going, I don't think that, but I'm happy. Like easy ones for me. Like I'm not a woman and I'm not a pastor. And I'm not too attached to a church. So talking to that Southern Baptist bloke that's like, women shouldn't be pastors. I'm like, oh, mate, please tell me more. I'm like, it doesn't
right. That's not triggering you at a very deep level.
That's right. But for me, like the things that probably do trigger me, because I teach economics at a school. And so the pro-Trumper, I was like, like my behind the scenes thoughts when I analyze it on my like sideshow that I've got, it's like that's my ego getting like, being pushed because he's talking about like Donald Trump is anti-establishment. He's gotten rid of the swamp. And in that interview, I was a bit like, I'm going to ask him some questions that I know and I'm not going to debate him. And I did a little, my ego got the best of me and I set him up for a bit of failure, but I think it did still show his process of thought. But inside I was a little bit I was setting me off a bit of a failure. And I was like, he's like, I knew he'd say Trump drained the swamp. I knew he'd be like, he's gotten rid of, he's not corrupt and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. So what would you say to the 281 lobbyists that are currently working directly in his administration, which is more than any administration before? And for me, I'm like, yeah, look at that data. But then I got proved wrong. I got proved right in my initial assumption. That's like, that's not going to convince him. He's like, oh, well, no, that doesn't matter, and that's not true. And I'm like, ex-Goldman Sachs banker, Exxon-Mobil CEOs are in there. Like, this is a pretty swampy swamp. And he's just like, no, I don't know where you're getting that. That's not true. Or it just water off a duck's back. And so it does get the better of me. Like I see that battle. But I also think my interviews are better when I disagree because I get to go, okay, what do you say to this idea? Because that might be my hesitation. And they might answer it well and they don't. I'm not there to say which is which. I'm just going to ask it and leave it there. So generally, it's actually more fun when I disagree because I think I ask better questions that dig a bit deeper and quicker. Like when I just agree, I might not be seeing what the other perspective can see.
Yeah.
So, I mean, open for a conservative co-host if anyone wants to come on and fill out the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a gift. And I appreciate you sharing a bit of your humanity in it as well, that you're not like this perfectly honed robot just made to ask good probing questions. Because I just don't know how you do it. And I do spot, I remember that moment specifically.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, oh, yes. And then I was
got
like,
him.
He's not going to care. He's not going to care.
Right,
why would he care?
And as soon as I say, oh, got him, I'm like, I failed the practice. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to go, oh, I get it now. So, I mean, the same question I think probably should have been asked, the same question. But I did notice that like, I'm not here to prove him wrong. I'm not here to prove I'm better than him. And I think it's just the practice. Like, I just got to keep trying and the more I do it, like my curiosity grows and I'm actually a bit bored with people I agree with now because I'm like, but I know this. Like I can see the world like you do. So, it's not an interesting perspective. So, yeah, I think the more you engage with it, and like you said, you learn to enjoy it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and absolutely asking people questions which you genuinely don't know the answer to is always better than asking questions that you know the answer to. And so, exactly. Like, even just, what do you say about all these lobbyists or whatever?
Yeah.
I don't really know what the hell your brain does with that information.
How does he weave it?
I'm really intrigued.
Is the news
and actually,
yeah,
it's so helpful for my audience to go, oh, I would think that's a killer argument too, but apparently doesn't matter. So, but that knowledge, I think it's so, it's such an integral way to approach things, to go, look, we all want people to think like we think, But it doesn't work like that. It's not going to happen. We're not going to change people by having a good argument with them. Maybe occasionally, once in a blue moon, someone changes and goes, bloody hell, that's a good argument. But generally speaking, it was probably a lot more behind the scenes and surface.
It's never happened to me.
You've never had someone... I live for the day that someone on your podcast just suddenly goes, fuck me, Konrad.
281 lobbyists?
I'm done.
Really? I'm off the Trump train.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is, right? Rob Bell's like, wait, what? That's in the Bible? I'm done. I'm going back to conservative Christianity.
About gay marriage? Like, I completely missed that. I'm back to banning it.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because we do, on some level, there's still this drive within us that goes, no, this will get them. If I can just, this is the argument. Because on some level, we think that was the argument that got us, when arguments probably didn't get us at all. Like you're saying, it's this culture, the shaping, the structure, the pressure of life on different angles and things like that. So I guess, I mean, you talk about, you can sit down with your dad and have a big debate on politics or something like that. Like, has building this muscle and practicing this practice of listening to understand rather than trying to convince people, has it bled into your day-to-day life? Like, can you see yourself becoming less, I don't know what the right words are, but less desirous of changing people and more of understanding people? Has that bled over? Because you just kind of say, well, I'm not really like that in real life. Yeah. And, but I can imagine it must have in some ways influenced how you think and do life, doing this for so long.
Yeah, my curiosity has grown in like way more to that. When you encounter somebody, I am far more curious in that exact question, being like, I'm not here to convince you for this argument, but I want to know what you would say to this. So I think it's easier the further out. And then as you practice, I feel like those walls kind of come in. So the people you know the least, it's like, who cares what he thinks about that? I don't even know the guy. You can think whatever you like. But then come one layer in. What about your church community? Like, does it bother you? And I think this is the thing that I see slowly shift the more I practice. And so I go, okay, my church might completely disagree with my entire interpretation or reading of the Bible. And I'm at the point, as I practice, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me how that works for you. Like, I'm more curious in the interplay between the idea and them as a person, and how the idea helps them as a person. And it moves in. And so, people in my church community. Okay, but what about your close friends? Like, he really disagrees with you. Can you be okay with that? And I think I've watched this circle just kind of close in. It's not at my dad level yet. It's not there yet. So I think I've got to do it like a lot more practice. But it just comes and goes. And it's like, I like this idea when they say, as I let go of this idea of, like enlightenment being something to be attained. I think you even said it in our chat with you, where it's like, it's not something to be attained. It's like you drop in and out. You're like, one day you'll be like, oh, I can really see the humanity of that person. And the next day, like, what an effing idiot, get off the road. Like, and I think that's kind of what happens. And I think like having this format of a podcast to sit down and enter a curiosity space where I put down the whole debate thing going, you are useless at the moment, I can't debate, there's no need, then the curiosity grows. And I definitely think there's a value in the practice itself. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. Konrad, I've got a great podcast episode for you. You and your dad.
Oh man, we would just go in circles and I'd just be like, yeah, but come on, you're still voting this way. He's like, yeah, but
people would just see you slowly devolve.
I'd lose all the only followers I've got left. They're like, man, Conrad, stop trying to convince your dad, mate. Just accept him.
Well, people might like it. They might like you. Finally, this guy's trying to he's saying what he believes in.
That's right. And I guess that's like, I've tried my best to hide my personal opinions on things in order to attract that timid, you're not on my side type of person. Mm-hmm. And I think I've done okay. Some people go, oh, I'm like, if you listen enough, you'll work it out. I think. And I've had a few close friends being like, yeah, I reckon this is what you think. And I'm like, yeah, you're pretty close. But I'm hoping that by trying to remain as neutral as possible, I still want to cast a wide net. I still want to be able to include the people that I might be very different to, include those people, those hardline us versus them, or the people that reject this idea of inclusivity. Actually, I don't know if anyone actually rejects the idea of inclusivity. Everyone loves the idea of it, but whether it's actually in their practice, you know.
Sure.
So
to what extent they can apply it.
That's right. So that's my goal is like, if I can remain as neutral as possible and try and be as fair. So if I can try and drill this side that I might agree with just as hard as the side I might not agree with, and you can't tell, then I'm like, okay, I think I'm doing a good job then. That's what I'm trying anyway.
Yeah, it's just an incredible gift. I keep saying it, but like it's something that and I'm not saying that as in like some sort of divine being has given you this gift. And I'm just saying you've clearly stretched it out and worked it, you know, and that is amazing. How have you in doing this? Because I know for myself, when I ask questions to understand, I often start to understand, and you know, like, it's funny that, you know, we talk about you can't just have this debate with someone and change your opinion. But actually, on some level, I think sometimes when you stop trying to do that and you start listening, sometimes you do end up changing your opinion in different ways. Like, can you think through the different conversations you've had, and can you identify, gosh, there were moments in there where I actually did start to go, oh, I actually think I'm starting to change my opinion on that, or soften an opinion on it, or has that happened to you in this practice?
Yeah, I think for sure. And I think maybe when we look at it, something like, has an opinion changed? Like we've said, I don't think that actually happens to almost anybody, like maybe outliers here and there. But I think what's happened as the progress of, if you enter into this practice, either listening to the podcast or just going, you disagree with me, tell me everything. Here's an argument that I think is pretty good. Tell me why that's wrong. What I think that does is it softens how hard my opinions are. So initially, over time, my opinions have softened to the point where if someone says, what do you think about this? It'd be like, well, in these like in what circumstances, for who, in what context, like I could, and then by that point, it's so soft that if someone says, well, yeah, in this circumstance with this, I'd go, well, I'm with you then. And then, but in this circumstance, I'm not. So first off, I think this curiosity of how other people see the world softens my opinion to the point where I'm like, I actually see like I'm very aware of how I see things now, and I understand that my worldview is so limited because I just come from this little white middle class Australian corner of the world. And when you encounter someone it's like when you go traveling, you encounter someone who's very different. You're like, I have no idea how you see the world, how you go to work and survive in this type of climate. You end up going, well, I don't really know really that much. So there is definitely, you start to genuinely believe that there's a lot you can learn from other people. So as my opinions soften, then when I'm in curious conversation with people asking hard questions, it happens all the time where you go, where your opinion doesn't like shift, like, oh, I used to think this and now I think this. It's more, I think maybe this. But then when you hear an idea someone else puts forward, like I think recent conversations I've had with a lot around racism, really, just being classic white dude here, the Bible through the lens of black people in the black church has just these conversations, just little things they say, the interpretation of the text, take a Bible verse of like, blessed are the poor, the weak, the downtrodden, all those things. I'm like, oh no, blessed are they, because they can see things I haven't been able to see for 30 years. And in this conversation, they'll say something like, I think Claudia, in her episode I released like 2 or 3 weeks ago, she said, I think the privilege of individualism. And I'm like, what? Like, I've been an individual my whole life. And then she goes on to explain that, you know, black people aren't afforded that privilege of individualism. When someone black robs a store, the story on the news and the narrative is like, oh, watch out for black people. Whereas a white guy goes, shoots up a school, it's like, ooh, bad mental health. Like that individual had a bad day. And just person. That, like it sounds so obvious when I say it, and you know, maybe people more enlightened than me are like, yeah, of course, Konrad, come on, catch up. But it's something that, a perspective that wasn't brought, like things like that happen all the time where I go, I knew it in theory, but it actually hit home this time. It actually, and I think if you're open to those curious conversations with somebody who you don't even have to disagree with them, just somebody who you know occupies a different world and a different lens to you. Oh, I think, you know, my world has broadened and widened, and so I'm really curious to explore like Indigenous Australian perspectives on how they just see the world. Like, what does consumerism look like from a culture that doesn't exist or didn't ever exist from within that, whereas I've only known that. And so it's like these people are actually a gift. They're a gift not only as a mirror to hold up, but to show you things that are just purely invisible because of the lens that I've been given. So yeah, I think it happens all the time.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love it. I really love it. Konrad, tell me a bit about, I know you're not one to talk about your own beliefs or anything like that, and I won't probe you for like specifics, you know, but tell me a bit about your journey. Like, so did you grow up in the Christian world? It sounds like that's kind of part of your tradition to some degree. I mean, Australian, it's a big part of the Australian culture for a lot of people is kind of conventional Christianity. Like, what's your story and like, how has that shaped who you are and how you've got to this place?
I think just sheer luck I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist church, if you've heard of that one.
Okay.
It's like, how would you describe it? Like Baptist, but they go to church on Saturday. Pretty Baptist.
Yeah. Big on the Saturday.
Yeah, they love it. They're like, their eschatology, like end times, it's like, you'll be the remnant church. If you go to church on Sunday, you're not the remnant buddies. Yeah. It's like the mark of the beast is going to church on Sunday to like some conservative, very conservative evidence. And I kind of joke about that because I never believed that. I was always joking. I was with my mom in like an Adventist bookstore and I was 20 at this point, and I'm walking around with my mom and I'm like, Mom, there's a lot of books about the Advent in this bookshop. What is the Advent? And I grew up Seventh-day Adventist for 20 years, Adventist church, like every weekend. And Mum's like, the second coming, the Advent. And I was like, oh, that's why we're obsessed with end times. And so it all clicked because I grew up more of my progressive side of Adventism. So conservative Adventist, that you're not allowed to swim, you're not allowed to play sport on a Saturday, can't watch TV on a Saturday. And then it all kind of slips because phones are like, is it TV, is it not? So I grew up in more of a liberal side of it. So yeah, we wouldn't play competitive sports, but we go mountain biking or we go surfing or my mum was pretty progressive in that. So I'd come home and go, Mum, do you know that we think we're the remnant, like the only true church? I don't know if there's a lot of churches out there. Statistically, that's quite a feat. Yeah. And my mum was always very open to those questions, being like, well, I think every church has probably got something, and I don't know if we're the remnant. So I grew up with like, when I was pushing the boundaries of it, it was pretty welcome. Like I never had this traumatic, like, no, you can't believe that. And I'd be like, oh, like evolution. Like if the earth didn't exist and there was no sun, how can it be 6 days if the Earth's not like rotating on an axis for the day to be a day? So does time exist, and like, does it really conflict with evolution? And you know, the people in my immediate circle were like, oh, maybe, I don't know. So it wasn't this deconstruction journey that I think probably a lot of people that you've had on your show have had. I've spoken to a lot, like this hard, traumatic. Being Australian too, we're a lot more laid back. You know, we don't have this hectic Southern Baptist American like. They're pretty full on in a lot of things, Americans. Like, they go hard out. And Australians are a bit...
Do it best. Whether that's the worst way to do it or not, they do it better than anyone.
That's right. That's exactly right.
They're going to do it with everything.
That's it. And so I didn't
I'm
really...
sorry, America.
You're sorry, America.
I say to this, and I'm like, 70% of my show, my audience are like Americans. Right. So sorry, please don't leave me.
To our lovely American listeners and friends of the show, you guys have Chipotle. Bloody love Chipotle.
God,
and
I love Chipotle.
We don't have Chipotle, so clearly America's doing something right.
We have two, and they're both about 300 miles from me. So.
Oh, damn. Yeah, I would give a lot of money to have a Chipotle in Australia. But so that's been my like... Australia's, we're very much more laid back. Like, America has the culture of revolution in their blood, whereas Australians, we wouldn't revolt if we were literally being oppressed. We'd be like, yeah, but people are a bit dumb, so we probably should have that rule. Like, yeah, she'll be right. Like, we probably need a bit more America in us. But so that was kind of my religious context and upbringing, and pretty progressive, pretty involved. Like, I play music and like drums in church. So I could always play drums, whereas some conservative sides of my church, they're like, no, drums are from the devil. And I was always like, whatever, no, they're not. And I think from there, it was just the slippery slide of progressive theology going into the gateway drug of Rob Bell, where it's like Velvet Elvis ideas, where it's like, well, can you say for certain that this is the best religion and the best ideas? Like, it's all changing and growing. And it was like one step to the other to the next, which was I'd accept pretty easily. And I never had this traumatic rebellion against my group I came from. I think I had a pretty good upbringing, great community. I've moved quite a ways from a literalistic interpretation of a lot of the doctrines and things that people might hold to vehemently. But I never went through this hard Dawkins grade atheism type thing. Like, I remember as you just question and then you come to the precipice of like atheism. And I think I came to it where I was like reading a bit of C.S. Lewis, watching it like Dawkins and all these atheists and stuff. And I came to the point where I'm like, it's all story, isn't it? What do I want to believe? What's going to help me? And I think from that point, I just discovered and as probably a Rob Bell thing, it's like, what leads me to more life, hope, openness, acceptance, inclusion? That's the way I want to go. And so it's like, what story does that? And for me, like this atheistic worldview, I was like, it's a bit reductionistic for me. I never saw in the atheist worldview, I felt it never had the nuance of the liberal Christianity I grew up with. It never had it was always a caricature that I was never a part of. So I was like, Dawkins, I agree with you, mate. That's not I didn't grow up in what you're talking about. Yeah. I'm like, I'm with you, mate. Like, so he was never a compelling figure for me. And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of what it is. Like, up to the edge of atheism to the point where I'd be like, oh, yeah, what helps? What's helpful? It's all story. And then just kind of the progressive beliefs until there. And so I think deconstruction happened quite slowly, not that traumatically. I think a bit of deconstruction and reconstruction would happen at the same time. Like, well, that idea is clearly a bit of a joke. But this one, let's loosen it and broaden it and make it kind of fit a little bit more. And I think that journey's just continued up until now, where, I find authors like Richard Rohr very reconstructive. They take a worldview I was handed, language I was handed, myth that I was handed, a collective story, and then gone, here's actually a way of reading it that is actually quite interesting and helpful as a collective. And I go, wow, now that is an interesting reading of the Bible. And that is actually relevant to me now, not because it's the Bible and you have to read it this way and you have to, that's the typical, hey, you have to hold these intellectual beliefs, but like, here's what the text is kind of talking about. And here's a comment on humanity. And I go, oh, that is actually a very interesting comment, Jesus. Well done on, I guess you did become famous for some reason. So I think, I don't know, it's hard to pinpoint any one thing. It was like, I've never really gone through a disownment or a hatred or been outcast from my community, or I don't know. We'll see how this podcast goes, because it probably steps on a lot of people's toes. And I know there's a few people listening from within the fold, so to speak. But you can't argue with being curious. Don't we just want to be curious?
No, absolutely.
Don't we want to just include and accept? Well, that's all I'm trying to do. So if you're anti-including and accepting, it's probably not for you.
It's so funny, isn't it? Because those kind of language, like you said, like no one is anti-inclusion. Like no one's going to go, yes, we are exclusive. We do not like including people. But people hit walls. We all hit a wall, right? We all, we all love people, and then we get to a certain barrier and we go, oh, mister, I don't know if I want to include you. I don't want ISIS as part of my guys. I don't want that pedophile as a part of my guys. Like, we don't. There's a line somewhere where we go, gonna stop recognizing you as something common with me as a human, and somehow dehumanize you because I'm not comfortable now. We've broken that, and different groups will draw that line so much sooner than other groups that draw it much later. But most of us, I think even the most inclusive people in the world will somehow have, and generally, I mean, even the people that are radically inclusive, generally speaking, can be some of the most exclusive people there are. as far as the passion through which they exclude people, and it's because they exclude people, so we're not going to include them. And so, you know, we all do it on some level somewhere.
That's right. Our propensity to create purity codes out of anything is like, so we critique religion for this exclusive purity code that says you need to follow these rules, be like this to be included. And then as I just step back and look at religion from the outside, I go, wow, look at that pattern of like exclusion and a list of things you have to do. And then I step back and go, oh, politics. Well, it's there as well. And the progressive left has essentially become, and let's talk a stereotype of the progressive left, it's a broad church, but it's essentially become like, has its own set of purity codes being like, you need to hold these beliefs and you can't say that and you've got to be like this and you've got to hold this belief, you've got to vote this way. And it's become just as condemning of those who are not like you, because it almost feels like it has a better moral justification. And maybe it does. It's like, you're oppressing those people, so I'm allowed to hate you. And I think it's almost more potent because you do have that extra moral element in there that says they are hurting other people with those doctrines and beliefs. Like purity culture within the church causes a lot of trauma, especially for women within that. And so if you say, well, I hate you now because you're part of that, it's like you get a good justification for it. That's even more intoxicating because now you're allowed to kind of hate them, condemn them. And I think a helpful reading of Jesus was him going, let's not do that to anybody. And I think that pattern of religion will repeat. We have just this new age fundamentalism. Like now crystals are like the thing that, you know, you got to have these crystals. You got to have these. You got to be anti-vax. You got to be like, I don't know. I see it in everything now. So that same religious pattern, I'm like, geez, we're all just little bloody religious creatures and we will turn anything into an idol and we will create a ritual around it. We'll create community around it. And you've got your church. You've got just a church that worships consumerism, individualism, political parties, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. In any of these communities, I've yet to see communities and ideologies to which you can belong that are devoid of scapegoats. Yeah. You know, like it's Brene Brown's thing. Like you only belong everywhere when you stop belonging anywhere. Because if you belong to a group, it means that there's another group. There's somewhere a line was drawn and it's like, I belong here. Well, that means I don't belong over there. So to belong everywhere, I have to go, I'm not playing this game. I am not playing. And I've not seen that particularly. I mean, I've seen it articulated as a philosophy.
Yeah. It's a good idea.
but I just don't see it very often. I know in me, I have my scapegoats. I have the people that I just go, yeah, no, that person, let's get them up on a cross and kill them. Because they are the opposite of what I believe in. And I've grown and my inclusive group is massive now. Now there's only 5 people on the earth I don't like. Steve, Greg, Julie, and you know what I mean? Like it's like those are the people, but I've got to have someone. So I draw my line and go, but this is in and that is out. And it's really fascinating to see as people grow, the people that are out might be a smaller group, but there's almost a more visceral hate towards them than there was before. Like I've seen in many ways, people that are very progressive, liberal, they're deconstructing, they're growing in their inclusivity and their maybe even their morality and their love is growing, their capacities to love is growing. And yet I've seen them seethe with hatred over someone that's homophobic more than the homophobic person does over someone that's gay. At times, not black and white, that can be very different. I've seen some very horrific seething of homophobic people. But I'm saying, but there's a danger where I can become so outraged by that outside group, by the scapegoat that I'm creating, that, we're all playing the same game somewhere. And can we transcend it? Can we?
That's right. And that's right. Like, I think that's a very Brian McLaren idea. Have you spoken to Brian McLaren?
I've not had him on. I know Brian, yeah.
Yeah.
I need to have him on.
Because his latest book goes through I think it's awesome. It's like the 4 stages of like religious belief. He's just synthesized a few different things. And it's like the first one's like us versus them. The second one's you're getting better at the game. The third one is deconstruction. And then the fourth one's like reconstruction. And I think that's what he talks about, the movement from the third stage deconstruction into finally some form of reconstruction. And obviously it happens in stages, and you'll reconstruct in this part, but still be deconstructed over here in another section of your life.
Sure.
But he talks about like seeing yourself, like you're saying there. If I can see myself and go, yeah, I've still got scapegoats. Seeing my complicity within this system to the point where it's like I probably will always have a scapegoat. And if I can just kind of recognize it as soon as I can and just be like, I guess I, at the moment, am scapegoating billionaires. Rupert Murdoch, I'm looking at you, mate, ruining our Australian society. You're still my scapegoat. Yes, that's right. Fox News and the UK. He's our beast. I'm sorry for that. So, I mean, look at us both seething over billionaires like Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, you don't have to go hard for yeah. My big one is, so this will be like weeks behind now, but yesterday the big thing came out with Meghan Markle and Harry and I am a very strong, I mean, I will not hide my opinions on the monarchy. I'm Scottish.
Big fan.
I'm not pro-monarchy. Huge fan of the monarchy. No, I'm not a big fan.
How many babies are Meghan have now?
All my friends know well. Most of my friends are English. They know well how much I do not like the monarchy. Yeah. And the group chat yesterday, I held back so much because suddenly in the group chat there was this explosion of anti-monarchy conversation, and I just sat there with this like gleeful like thought of like, I'm so happy people are agreeing with me. They see how terrible the monarchy. Not even the people within the monarchy. I mean, I'm sure there's bad people and good people within the monarchy. It's such a broad group. But the concept, the system, it's fucked up, right? The whole thing is kind of really fucked up. We talk about classism and what that's built on and what ideas that supports and holds. And yet there's this thing in me. I literally was like, don't talk it, don't share, like don't jump in and go like, see, I told you, I'm like, right, and all these things that suddenly come up when you see when your point is proven, when you get your thing, like So you mentioned Rupert Murdoch, and I think fuck that guy. I hate him.
Right. Like, if that's your reaction, like, that's your scapegoat.
That's a normal reaction to have about Rupert Murdoch. I'm pretty confident. But is it the best reaction? Is it the healthiest? Is it, and I mentioned homophobic people. Of course, those people are dangerous. They're harmful. They're causing huge pain and suffering.
Yeah.
So it's not to excuse that.
No.
But does hating them fix that?
That's right.
That's the question we're asking. Does hating Rupert Murdoch change that? Does hating the monarchy change the monarchy? Does it change anything? Maybe it does. Maybe it riles you up. Maybe it moves you to action. Maybe you manage to block gay conversion bills, or create new ones that ban it. Or maybe you manage to start a big riot and the monarchy falls, and you get to behead them all with guillotines. And I don't think we'll be doing that these days. That's right. But it's tough. Please go on.
No, I think you nailed it. It's like, if I can continue to accept that human pattern, and if I can just, and this is an idea that I don't hold, but I would like to hold it. I hold it intellectually, which doesn't mean much, but it's like, it's a very Peter Rollins idea where it's like there is no idol, there is no wholeness and completeness, there is no perfection, there is no enlightenment. Like, and I'm probably butchering because it's not from my culture, but it's like, if you see the Buddha on the road, kill it, because it's not the true Buddha. And I'm like, well, look at me. I'm so bloody enlightened by quoting some Buddhist things. But I think I like that idea where it's like, will I ever achieve this? Well, maybe not. But can I continue to can I be content with that journey of going, there's my idol, there's my scapegoat. Oh, there we go. Okay, I can see it now. Let's kind of work through it and try and be okay with that process and that journey is something I would like to hold. But obviously, like, I'm still pretty utopic in my ideas, being like, listen, Phil, if we could seriously just get rid of Rupert Murdoch, democracy would be a hell of a lot better. I would put good money on that. And so I'm still a bit utopic in that. And I think, you have to have this balance of striving for something, striving for change, but not just wasting my life expecting a utopia to come that will never come, expecting enlightenment to come to me as if it will ever, like, hope. I don't know. I hope to be able to be more like that as I just journey through life.
Yeah. And It's interesting. I mean, your whole shtick is understanding people, listening to people, not trying to change them. And I think what we can learn from that, if there's anything you can learn from that, is that you don't get to change people. It's very rare that you get to be the person that somehow manages to magically change a person, right? So you could, I don't know, somehow land the gig of being Rupert Murdoch's assistant and be around them every day and whatever. And maybe you'd be like, oh, this is it. I'm going to like work in from the underground. I'm going to try
paying
and like
taxes is a good idea. Yeah.
There you go. Start paying taxes. Maybe start undermining the press and like, taking over everything. Like whatever it is, right? But the odds are really the closest people to people. It's very rare. Actually, I think it's his son James, isn't it? That he's been very influenced by having a very progressive and liberal wife, I think. So that's an interesting dynamic, but I can imagine that that's not going to be a massively important dynamic, and the money will just filter to the other son.
That's right.
But the point being, certain people, maybe getting married, maybe being exposed to radical love and acceptance might change us and warp us at times or whatever. But on the whole, the only person that I am ever going to change in this world with certainty is me. And when I'm fixated on finding my scapegoats and being in the right group, I don't change, right? If it's about, I've arrived, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, I worship on a Saturday, screw everyone else, they're going to hell, but I'm going to be there with all the Saturday worshippers for an eternal Saturday in heaven. Like, that doesn't promote growth. It doesn't promote change. It says you've arrived. In the same way that, like it could be whatever, I'm Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a charismatic, well, we worship with our hands raised and singing in tongues. And so look at all those other people that don't really know the Spirit. They're probably going to have a worse seat in heaven. I mean, charismatics tend to be a bit more gracious, still let them in, but you get to sit in the back or whatever, and we're sitting right next to Jesus on his lap or whatever. But we have arrived, we know what's right. And maybe there's growth, but it's growth like within the same thing. It's like a horizontal growth rather than a vertical growth, if that makes sense. And I think it highlights how susceptible we are to finding things that stop us growing and changing. It's almost like a defense mechanism. If I've got an enemy that I can point at that they need to change, and I'm in the right group when we're perfect, I no longer need to do the hard work, right? My ego can go, this is nice. I can just chill out, occasionally throw some mean tweet at someone, tweet Rupert Murdoch some sass, and I'm good. And that's a real danger to me, I think. And I think programs like yourself, like, what you're doing is it forces us to look within, I think, a lot of the time. I wonder, though, I don't know, do you have a good grasp on who your audience are? Do you think that that's what it does to them? Do you think that... Or do you, because I think you talk about turnover, I know you've mentioned it a lot on Instagram and things like that in passing and just like joking around about it. But do you think a lot of that is because people are looking to play that game? They don't want to change. They just want to find a podcast that is, here's the progressive podcast that makes me feel good and jokes every week about how bad conservatives are, or vice versa, right? Do you, where do you peg your audience? Do you have a kind of idea of who they are and what they're doing?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think the graph definitely like spikes up and down, like you said, and I think it's a small but very engaged group of people that have really bought into the idea, that they've really bought into the going like, no, like I do want this practice. And I do mean it when I say at the beginning of the show, half jokingly, like it's not for everybody, and it's probably not for you. Like because I think, and it can easily like, it's a bit of a marketing shtick, someone being like, what do you mean it's not for me? I'm going to listen just because, despite you, that might be the anti-authoritarian Australian there listening, trying to pick them up. But I think it can come across either very elitist, being like, well, mate, I feel it's not for you, mate. Like, don't worry. It's for us enlightened people that can hold attention. Right, But I want to mean it. And in my best days, I mean it as like, you don't have to do this. And it's being able to, in order to be curious and to truly not try and change somebody, I have to let go of the idea that even doing this practice is for everybody and everybody needs to do it. And to truly accept that I look back at the tradition I came from, the trauma that it can cause people and the tough experience a lot of my friends have had and all those things. And most days I don't want to change it because it made me. I don't believe most of what it says in the same sense. But I got here through that framework. I pushed against that framework. That framework shaped me. It grew me. And so if someone comes to my platform and goes, ugh, not for me, then I kind of want that to be okay and to be like, no, you need like, let's take, I think what I'm noticing is like that, like deconstruction is like really, really growing, and you know that very well. Like, and I think what happens is like, there's that deconstruction where people like really like get in there and like, F these conservatives, like they screwed us, I'm traumatized, like I need to just rail against this. And I think, like that's a space that people probably need to occupy for some time, just like they had that conservative box that they broke free of, and they are where they are because of that trauma and that tough box that they came through. And it's easy for me to say because I didn't really come through it. So it's easy for me to sit back and go, oh, I don't know if the system needs to change. But it's me trying to just accept the necessary suffering. Like, you don't wish it on anybody. But when I encounter like this suffering that I might have gone through, I end up with these ideas that purely came from that level of suffering. If I did what I wanted and avoided that suffering, I wouldn't be where I am today. So it's this tough kind of acceptance of it. So with people in the podcast, it's like people just might not be there, and it might be too triggering for some people. Maybe they need to just get into a group of people and be like, you're with me, I'm safe, finally. I'm finally safe to be myself. And if I want to swear and say F this guy and F that guy, and it can, bring me some security, then like, sure, that's where you've got to be. But then for those people who, I guess, want to have the practice of going, what does it look like to love the enemy? What does it look like to try and grow that? Because I think it's easy with this abstract concept of like, oh, just love your enemy. Oh, sweet, I'll just go do that now. Oh, Rupert Murdoch, I love you, mate. Right? But then there's, I think, true change can only come through a practice. So so my audience, I think there's a dedicated group of people that I think get value out of that experience of going, that almost liturgical practice of going, I'm going to sit uncomfortably for an hour listening to this guy. And if I get to the end and I go, all right, I get the pieces you put in place, I do think that moves us to being able to love people more. Probably not the only thing you have to do to get there, but it might be something that helps.
No. Yeah, no, I can see that. Are you familiar with Spiral Dynamics? I know you're big in Richard Rohr and Rob Bell and stuff. So,
I've listened. I've listened to a podcast ep or two on it.
Because it sounds like a very integral practice of what you're doing. It's very yellow in its perspective of like, people are growing up and they're going through different stages, and what's important to them at different stages is going to be different based on where they're at, how they've come, the different contexts they've grew up in, the different experiences they have. They're going to be growing up and developing in different ways. And in the same way that maybe a university student doing literature might look at a text that you looked at when you were 12 in high school and go, well, actually, this actually isn't that great in the way of literature in a lot of ways. There's actually some like real problems with it. But because of that, that's why we actually quite like some of these things. And it's a bit more common. But at 12, you're not having that conversation. You're not ready. You're just looking at it as like a book, and you're picking out your favorite theme and, like or whatever. And I think it's recognizing we grow, and at different stages, we engage with different ideas in different ways that are important to us then and may not be important to us future, but will always be important to us in a sense. Like you're saying, like I would rather not be born into a fundamental church and grow up through that. But actually, the reason I can help people coming out of fundamental Christianity is because I was born into a fundamental church and came out of it. And so I'm kind of glad. And I would rather that my mum didn't die young of cancer. But I grew in empathy more than I've ever grown, and I've grown in my capacity to explore my own emotions, and I actually grew in my love and connection for my mum much more than I ever had, and whatever, you know, and I dealt with death, and I've dealt with the kind of existential dread of death and whatever, and other things have helped me with that. But, you know, these different things that you go, wouldn't wish that on anyone. I don't wish anyone to ever experience the death of a loved one, but I sure hope that they would somehow get the same lessons I got through that experience. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people aren't there. They're not in the place to look at the nuances and see both sides and see how, as people grow up, things are more helpful at different stages and might be really, and there's probably really valid parts to all of it. Like we one of the things I do a lot with people is people go, I'm really struggling. I'm trying to deal with regret and shame and guilt and hatred of the church and all these different strong emotions. And I go, sit down, grab a bit of paper and write down everything good that you learned while you were in church that you still use or want to use today. And they come back and they're like, dude, I had to go get like 5 more bits of paper. You know, do you know what I mean? Of course, there's loads of stuff. You learn loyalty, you learn compassion, you learned community, you learned how to love better. Might not be as well as you love now, but it was more than you loved before you entered into this kind of community that loved you so much. And so it's recognizing that people are at different stages, but there's so much to draw from those really crappy. We look back and go, I wouldn't want to be there anymore. That would not serve me. Or a real suffering. I think it's a beautiful way to approach things, but I do think you're right. I do think strongly it's not for everyone, and then not from an elitist like you know, this isn't for everyone, but just know the season you're in, know what's going to serve you, what helps you grow. I think you hit the nail on the head.
And maybe to even backpedal and say the opposite of what I just said. I hope that the practice is for everyone, because at the same time, there's the element of like understanding their perspective, but through that, I'm hoping people understand the human and the humanity. And so like, that's kind of why I heavily couch it in this ideology of we want to understand the humanity. We understand the ideas that divide us so we can see the humanity that connects us. Because I think that has to be for everybody. I think we have to be able to see the humanity in somebody else. Otherwise, I think we end up passing on a lot of, we just end up perpetuating that trauma. And I think the internet's the obvious and perfect example where it's like, you look at the comments and you're on the internet, so you get like comments from people. And if you were to literally run into that person on the street, they'd be like, hey mate, oh, it's nice to meet you. And he's probably like, oh, Phil, what an idiot. I hate that guy's podcast. And you run into him and he's like, hey mate, great show. And he'd probably, it would just be completely different. And so it's like, because you can encounter their humanity. And I think I hope that if this way of encountering someone's humanity is not for everybody, but I hope that encountering people's humanity is for everybody. And I hope to be able to find other ways to connect people's humanity in other ways. I don't know. This is a very intellectualized way of doing it. It's the way I engage with the world. I just like the mechanics of ideas and what leads to what and how they got there. And so if I find any other practices that I find that I come across that are useful for connecting with people's humanity, I think it has to be for everybody. Otherwise, I think we end where we are politically right now. That's where we end up, and it's not pretty.
No, it isn't. I think another big way that works is in service. I think that there's such a huge. I mean, I don't think it's any surprise that one of the strong metrics of personal growth and one of the strong metrics of overcoming or coping with mental health issues. In both those, one of the strongest metrics is helping other people. And so like, it's been shown again and again and again in studies over the last kind of 30, 40 years. If you have severe depression, severe anxiety, severe, anxiety, all sorts of different stuff, go go help at a soup kitchen. And it's not that you go, oh, look at the perspective. It could be worse. Maybe I'm actually. It's not that at all. There's something about it. It draws you in and connects you with. I don't know. They haven't actually hammered down the why. But there's so much in that experience that helps us go, whoa, I'm connecting with someone that I probably wouldn't cross paths with, generally speaking. I'm not hanging out with homeless people every day. I'm not hanging out with people that are on the breadline and barely surviving and have to come along to a food bank or something like that. I'm not doing that. And it grounds us. And I think, so I think there's something about serving people as well that is a lot less of an intellectual pursuit, and it's much more of a nitty gritty, let me feed you, let me sustain, let me make sure that another human being survives another day. That's a beautiful practice that does something internally. I think that, I don't know, it connects us with something bigger than ourselves. It connects us with this that's going on. There's humans out there that are different, and it's so interesting, the connecting with people on that human level, and looking beyond the things that we disagree on, and I'm just in awe. I really am.
I hope, as I look out at this growing deconstructed movement and this reconstruction movement, and as Christianity progresses, like even if you listen to the Liturgist podcast, they've gone, well, should we just reform Christianity? Like, let's just lean into it. That's what it seems like, the direction it's going. And I just hope, I'm looking forward to what people come up with in order to formalize that. Like what you're talking about, being like, we need, like, that's what church did really well and does really well, like connect with people, all those types of things. What would it look like as we pull out the harmful things and create liturgies and practices and service things that can connect us with people's humanity? Because it's a necessary deconstruction for sure. But what's next is what I'm very curious to watch as I think this generation kind of grows up and pulls it apart, and what are they going to build to eventually be torn down again, I guess. So,
yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think there is that early stage deconstruction is Rage Against the Machine. It's pull it down, it's destroy it, it's look at all this terrible stuff. And it's all true. And I think it's probably a needed stage for most people. And some of this stuff really needs to go. Like, we cannot move forwards and have an institution that's it's just horrifically racist and sexist and homophobic and transphobic and whatever else. Like, that's going to have to go. But can we have institutions that care for their community really well? Can we have institutions that go, oh gosh, Julie is having a baby and she's a single mom. Maybe we should club together and make some meals for her so that she can put them in the freezer and eat. Her and her family can eat without having that extra stress of how are we going to make meals, or that's the sort of stuff that church does, and you're like, that's beautiful. That is just absolutely wonderful and beautiful. And I think there's so much to be redeemed there, and I think it is going to be interesting to see as people grow in their deconstruction. They grow beyond the rage season where this is wrong and we need to fix it, or we need to tear it down and destroy it. There's going to be a part going, okay, and as we move forwards, we start to realize, but it'd be really nice if we had a tight community though, wouldn't it? It would. And it'd be really nice if we were really loyal to one another. And actually, we're going to need a lot of discipline to get this job done. And these are all things that I actually learned at that very conventional stage of my life. Loyalty and discipline and community and serving people and let's not serve people in a weird, abusive kind of hierarchical,
manipulative.
It's not going to be the person in charge who's getting his car washed and his garden done for free by people in this organization anymore. But maybe it is going to be, okay, how can we go out into the community and find the those that are suffering and serve them? And it's really exciting to wonder, what does this become? What does it do? And there's huge divergement, right? Like, I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think Christianity is going to go anywhere. I think there's going to be evolutions of Christianity. We might see less and less conventional forms of it. But I do think as well, people are going to go, we're going to grab some of that Christian stuff and we're going to build something that is not Christianity anymore. Because I think some people are done, right? They're just like, I don't need that word God, Christian, that stuff's just too laced with stuff for me. I'm just going to move on. It's going to be really, really fascinating to see how it all plays out for sure.
How will it build together? That's what I've been the the phrase that I've been mulling over from Richard Rohr is like, only corporate evil can be overcome by corporate good. And I think that's I think the challenge of our generation is to go, there is a shit ton of corporate evil. We've mentioned Murdoch a bit and just, you know, the commodification of the environment, all that kind of stuff. Like that's corporate structural destruction. So it's like, man, if Richard Rohr's right and only corporate good can combat that, then I think that's the challenge of our generation. Like, how do we create corporates, collectives that can then counter that? I don't know.
Yeah. I'm remarkably hopeful. I think I'm a weird, like, odd one in this whole discussion. And I think it is within the deconstruction community, I'm a weird one because I do see things as very positive. I kind of try and look right back through it all and try and integrate it and stuff. But I just think, like, you go find me 115-year-olds, right? And let's be honest, teenagers, we are not at our best as teenagers. But you go ask 115-year-olds what they think about the media, what they think about gay people, women's rights, what do they think about climate change and the world moving forwards? What do they think about the world we need to build? You know, what should the world look like in 50 years? You know, that conversation is not going to be the same as if you asked 100 people in their 60s or their 80s or their 40s. And I just think we are moving in that direction one way or another. People are growing up in a beautiful and very encouraging way, I think, honestly. And so I get quite excited about it, to be honest, because I do think one way or another, we're going to become this corporate thing that is going to be corporately good.
Yeah. Whether that's true or not, I'll choose to believe it because it's a bit of hope.
It just sounds good, right? Let's grab
I'll go with it. I've got no evidence to the contrary either way. So I'll choose which one and I'll choose that one. Thanks for that.
It's I mean, I can go into some of the most conservative. I mention this a lot because it's the last place I got to travel to. So it was obviously like a decade ago. But like I went to America last year and I was in really rural communities and obviously very conservative, very conventional in the way they do life. But I was amazed because I was hanging around with like the kind of 30, 40s, 50s, 60-year-olds that were kind of like the odd ones out in these communities because obviously they're asking me to come hang out with them. But what's really interesting is anyone I talked to that was under 20, like whether they were part of a conservative family or not, you know, obviously some of the people I was hanging out with, they had kids, but actually people I wasn't hanging out with, some of them had kids. You talk to them and they're like, yeah, like obviously this is kind of crazy, right? We have the internet. We don't actually just believe what this little town thinks, or you know, like yeah. So it's just like I'm just so encouraged by stuff like that because you can go to the most conservative place in the world, and of course some of the kids are full blown brainwashed, homeschooled, not allowed outside. You know, this is the way it is. But most of them have an iPhone and they're watching Netflix and YouTube and TikTok, and they are learning how the world thinks, how people in Northern Europe think, how people in Australia think. It's just really, it encourages me a lot. It really does. It'll be really interesting to see kind of how it progresses. How do you see Ideas Suggest progressing, you know, moving forward? What do you see? You mentioned, like, you know, you've been talking a lot about kind of Christianity and deconstruction. Do you see branching out into some other ideas? Have you got things in the back of your head like, oh, I'd really like to talk to some of these people?
Yeah, I'd love to go wherever the community points me. I want just complete, hey, I've come across this guy, I completely disagree with him. See if you can get him on the show. I want to explore that. I kind of want to go wherever people are moving. And so that's kind of always in the back of my mind. Like that's kind of where I want to go as I build up engagement and people participating in the practice, then going, oh, my uncle thinks this and he reads this guy. See if you can get him on and just follow that. But I also want to, like, in the meantime, double down on worldviews, like, big world shaping worldviews where it's like going into, like, because we've gone down the Christian rabbit hole, and I know it well. I grew up in it. I know the progressives, the liberals, the literalists, liberation theology. Like, there's so many different variants, and they're actually very different. But I'm very curious to see whether that level, and I'm almost certain it does, just theoretically, that level of like nuance and difference and minutiae exists within Islam, within Buddhism, within like, can I get as deep in Islamic rabbit hole where it's like, you know, you have your ISIS and then you have your progressive, deconstructed, like less literal imam that might be, you know, is there like, I don't know yet because I haven't gone down the rabbit hole. So if the listeners, you know, are aware, like I'd almost put good money that there's some YouTubing imam going like, and I heard one on our Australian like Q&A TV program, and he was Muslim, and he's talking about jihad, and he was like, jihad, yeah, it's like internal struggle, internal battle. That's what it is. And I'm like, listening to this guy, I'm like, this guy just sounds like a progressive Christian. And so I'm really curious to explore like those worldviews, but almost as deep as I've gone within Christianity. It's going to be harder because it's not my worldview. It's not my wheelhouse. I don't know the Rob Bell of Islam. I don't know the Rob Bell of Buddhism. But I don't know. Hopefully, as a community, we can kind of find that and go, how can we see the lens? Like, what if we adopted some of these ideas? How would they help us? You know, so that's the short term plan. And just anything in between, anything super controversial, I'd dive into it and see what happens. Yeah. Anyone who wants to talk to me.
Yeah, but be controversial.
Yeah, just be very outrageous and you're in.
Absolutely. Dude, I love what you're doing. I really do. And I'm looking forward to that stuff. I love looking at worldviews that I'm less familiar with and being exposed. And I've more recently been looking at, I've dove a lot more over the years into Eastern philosophy and religion, but looking at Islam recently as well. And I'm just like you said, like, holy crap, like there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different perspectives in here. And there's thousands of different sects and denominations with it. You're like, it's just Christianity again, not conflating Islam and Christian belief the same thing, but like, these systems and structures that fracture and divide over what we believe in, you're wrong and we're right, and it's happening everywhere, it seems.
That's right.
And it's so interesting to hear. And yeah, you hear a certain progressive kind of Islamic people speak, and you're like, oh yeah, I could see that. I could see how you could open the Quran and use that as a beautiful teaching that helps you live life in a more beautiful way, and you engage with it as myth and metaphor rather than just, you know, like a literal text that's telling you black and white how to clean your teeth every day and whatever else it is. Absolutely.
That's right.
I have one last question, but we'll wrap up. But I am so intrigued with you will deal with this even more than I do. I don't really deal with this much anymore, and I'm kind of surprised I don't. I used to deal with it a lot when I was much more in the Christian world. Hate mail. I've seen you post some really funny things. You know, you'll post like, you know, public reviews and things like that. And how do you deal? Because there's a thing where when you're talking to people that are radically extreme on either end of the spectrums, and you're exposing people that are in your audience are going to be along this whole spectrum to someone else in a different position, and encourage them to listen. I'm sure your loyal, you know, true Konrad fans, ideologists, like loyal patrons and everything, they're going to love it. They're going to love it. But there are people that kind of dip in, dip out. Like you said, you've had Rob Bell, whole new bunch of new people be like, oh, I'll listen to a new Rob Bell interview. That sounds interesting. And then the next week you're like, oh, and here's someone that despises the New Age and thinks Rob Bell is Satan. I can imagine some of them being like, dude, I'm not happy about that. I'm going to send you a message. Or vice versa. Maybe they listen to the New Age woman and then they go, oh, I'll check out more of this guy's stuff. It's great. He's given us a platform. And then they listen to the prior episode and they're like, he didn't correct Rob Bell. I can imagine some of the stuff you get maybe isn't so nice and so encouraging. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the kind of the onset of people's aggression and upset over what you're doing?
Well, I think I don't get that much well thought out direct hate mail. Part of me would welcome it because it's just another data point. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm treading on toes. I feel like if I'm not getting it, I feel like I'm not doing it right. So part of me like kind of looks at it and is okay with it. But I also haven't gotten that much. Like some of the reviews I posted, like, yeah, that review I posted, I can't remember what it was. It was like, yeah, I mean, it was long enough. It was 1 star on iTunes, and it was like this interviewer like completely out of his depth or something like that. And I think what I find is that the people that really drop the hate comments and swing past, they don't actually listen to the show. And because I'm not saying things directly, the biggest thing I'll get, like the biggest hate is like, I can't believe you give this, like with the Pete Evans, I can't believe you give this idiot a platform. You're just as bad as he is, kind of thing. At the moment, it doesn't get to me too much because I guess my worldview is a bit more. There's a reason they're saying that. They saw a certain snippet. It's not for them. I'm not going to change their mind. And they're behind the computer. Like, I've been on YouTube long enough in my life to know these are just guys firing. I don't even think they fully know what they're sending. They're just like, watch the video. This guy's a wanker. Send. Like, part of me just goes, you don't even know what you're doing. You're just on the internet. Right. I more think it's more of a feature of the internet to be like, it's just the internet. So I've almost depersonalized it, being like, it's just the internet doing what the internet does. And I haven't gotten anything too personal and too aggressive because I think that's what comes with not being mega popular, really. As soon as things blow up, you collect a lot of people that haven't looked at the context and haven't looked at it. So anyone who listens to the show, I think, probably won't send those types of messages because there's so much. They have to essentially, by doing so, admit that they don't want to listen to other people and they don't want to accept other people and they don't want to understand other people. And no one really wants to admit that. So I feel like anyone who engages, they can't bring themselves to go, I can't believe you sat there and listened to his entire worldview and didn't vilify him and didn't call him names. I'm outraged. Like, no one's really...
As a closed-minded person, you're not going to say that, are you?
That's right. That's exactly right. So we don't want to... So maybe part of them doesn't, like, in order to do that, you have to admit this part of yourself that you would rather deny and hide from. So there's that. And then I think it still gets to you. Like, you read the comment, you get lots of support. Like, I have a great supportive community. And then you get one person that's like, oh, this interviewer sucks. I'm like, oh, come on, man. I'm doing my best. And then now I'm just kind of having fun with it. So I've just reworked it to the point where I'm like, I'll make a fun little reel out of this. This is good content. And so now this is my next project I'm trying to do, but it's not working. All these, like, because YouTube is where the big hate comments kind of come.
Right.
And I'll always kind of engage with the person who said it and gone, mate, look me up on Instagram. I'll get you on a live and you can just tell me to my face why I suck and why the show sucks. And I'd call it
amazing.
Hearing from the haters. And every single person I've reached out to and said, mate, love to hear your thoughts in person. Reach out to me. Here's my email. Let's link up. We'll do a show. Crickets. Nothing at all. And so I'm super disappointed. I wish I had a really convicted hater that was like, yeah, because I just think it would just be an amazing Christ-like practice, which is like, I'm going to verbally berate you and let's see if I can just sit here and take it and go, your interviewing sucks. Oh, really? Tell me why. Like, how could I do that better? I don't know.
That's so funny.
That's what
I think that's a great idea.
Like to do.
Yeah, like you said, no one's going to do that, right? Because it's the road rage in your car, right? You're road raging because you're in your car, right?
That's right.
You not scream at this person for walking slowly in front of you, right? Because you're like, dude, if he turns around, he's going to punch me in the face.
Yeah,
I'm not going to scream this verbal abuse and give him the finger and whatever and like. Maybe not, but when I'm in my car, I feel safe. I am yelling and screaming, I'm beeping, and it's the same on the internet, right? It's just you wouldn't do it. They would come up to you face to face and be like, "Oh, great show! I really like what you're doing."
Yeah,
fucking asshole! I hate that guy.
It's like at a restaurant. They're like, "Did you enjoy your meal?" You're like, "Oh yeah, it was really good." On the review, 1 star. Did not enjoy it all. I'm not going to do it to your face.
Not when you can actually fix this issue and actually like, sort it out for me. No, I'm
right.
going to rage about this for a week and leave an angry review.
That's right. I do that
It's funny because
sometimes.
you can start to go, yeah, no, actually, now I understand my trolls. Yeah, okay, I get it. I don't want to talk
We're
to me. I
all
just want to be
trolls.
angry.
Let's face it. That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So at the
This
moment,
is-
it's not bringing me down too much.
Okay, good. Because I do wonder, and I'm intrigued, and I think it carries relevance right through because as people, and most of the people in this audience are going through deconstructions there, and they're starting to figure out how do I start putting myself out into the world as in a more honest way and who I am, and that will be an extreme position for most of their loved ones, a lot of them. And so they are going to get some quote unquote hate mail, right? So they are going to get some negative feedback on their life choices and where they're at now and what they think. And I'm always intrigued by people that in a more public context do it, how they handle it. Because I know for me, like, it's only in the last couple of years that I've really started to be able to handle that well. I've been getting hate mail for like a good decade. And
Really?
it's hard. You can get 100 nice emails and one bad one. And it just sits in your head, right?
That's right.
It's really it's amazing how that works.
Make some reels
So,
about it, Phil. I reckon that's your practice to like.
Do you know what?
You're just giving me content, guys.
Occasionally-
You're feeding the beast.
Occasionally, I'll snip out any names or pictures or whatever, and I'll post a quote or something over on my Patreon. We have a Discord channel where we chat and stuff, and a couple of the people on my Patreon are like, dudes, please send us like these conversations and we'll act them out and make a video and you can post it. And I'm like, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. So I think the next time I have a really good conversation, I might do that.
Yeah, you know,
it's like, was it Jimmy Fallon that reads out people that
mean
tweet
tweets,
like hateful? Is it Jimmy Fallon? Someone like that.
yeah,
It's one
it's
of
like all the
like,
celebrities,
talk show
yeah.
guys. Or,
Yeah.
but yeah, and that's right. He gets celebrities on to read out mean tweets about them.
Yeah.
Oh man.
That's right. Have
So
you?
good.
Do you ever? And this will show my weird niche YouTube interest. You ever know the bodybuilder Rich Piana? I think that's how you say it.
I don't think so. No.
He died probably 5 or 6 years ago, and he was just like jacked. I actually met him once when he was in Melbourne. He's like huge, like on the gear, and he was a massive YouTuber, probably one of the biggest bodybuilder YouTube guys. I was fascinated by bodybuilding, weirdly, and he was in a video, and he was like, I think they were talking about the haters, and he just looked at the camera. He's like, the haters made me. Everyone's hating on me. He's like, they made me. You're feeding the algorithm. You're feeding the machine. Like, you made me. And so I think part of it is like, if someone was to write if someone wrote a whole review on my podcast being like, this guy's doing this, he thinks he's this, part of me would be honored because I'm like, I'm going places. Look at this guy. He's like, you know.
Doing my PR.
Because, like, the real lesson is don't engage it. If you hate it, ignore it. That's the real lesson. And so, on some level, if they've sent you hate mail, Phil, they've lost because they're giving you content and they're feeding the algorithm, and it's going to show up more. So, I look at it as a positive thing now.
I got a bunch of DMs on Instagram about 2 weeks ago, like out of the blue, one day, like 5 or 6 people messaged me saying, and it usually requires 5 or 6 people to say the same thing for me to really take note because I get random messages all day about stuff. But 5 or 6 people go, hey, dude, have you heard of this guy? I won't say his name, but it was like, he's like posting about you all over Facebook. And I'm like, no. And I spent like about half an hour trying to find this guy. I couldn't even find, like, you know, search his name. Like, it's not even coming up. And I'm like, who is this like random fringe person that enough people know about him, but like I can't even find him. Eventually found it, and he's posting, and he's like, there's this movement that Josh Harris and Phil Drysdale have started. And I'm like,
started. Look at you. Look at your credit.
Thank you. Like, this is it. I've arrived. And he's posting about my network, the Deconstruction Network, which helps people connect and stuff. And he's like writing stuff, and he's like, you know, this person's the worst and everything. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then I scroll up a little bit further, and he's like, I'm going to write a book about deconstruction, and I'm going to talk about how Josh Harris and Phil Drysdale and some other people are completely wrong. And I'm like, this is great. Like, honestly, my first reaction was like, this is marketing like I could never have paid
free
for.
marketing,
I could not afford this kind of marketing.
Into
but there's books with
behind enemy lines
pointing to me, and that's it. And there's so many people that are like kind of in that place where they're secretly deconstructing. They don't feel
Yeah.
safe to come out, or they don't even know what's going on. They don't even have language for it. But now they've read a book from like, you know, some like random evangelical, and they go,
Yeah.
oh, that's what I'm doing. That's what this is called. Oh, I'll check out Phil Drysdale and Josh Harris.
Never
and
go
whoever
to
else.
www.phildrysdale.
Never ever go to phildrysdale.com. Worst place you could head to. Don't read his Instagram.
Don't join the groups.
This meme that I'm sharing is the worst meme ever. Can you believe that Phil Drysdale over on Instagram shared this meme and does this every day? It's like,
That's
dude,
right.
what do you think is happening other than you advertising me?
And this, Phil, is where we can all learn from Donald J. Trump. Because he, you know, say what you want, but he understood this machine. And he could drive this machine. It didn't matter how many articles said Donald Trump said this, that, the other. All that mattered was that Donald Trump was being spoken about. So it's
incredible, isn't it?
If you're going to do that, I think you've already lost the game. So send me your hate mail, guys. Nah, just kidding.
That's it.
Don't be too mean.
You need like John Piper or something to tweet, you know, farewell, ideas suggest.
Yes.
We'll figure out something that rhymes, but that'll be it.
Yeah.
Konrad, I've really enjoyed this conversation. How can people
Me too.
connect with you? Podcast, obviously, Ideas Suggest.
Yep.
Instagram, is that kind of your favorite kind of social place?
Yeah, Instagram if you want to just engage, chat, reach out. Instagram, if you have any ideas for the show, you can send it through DMs there or ideasdigest@gmail.com. That's it at the moment. I've got a website I'm trying to build, but haven't done it yet. So, yeah, that's it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
No, it's good. And do you have a Patreon or something? Something that people can support?
I don't have a Patreon, but I do have a Substack, which I wouldn't recommend. But if you're listening to the show and you're like, oh, I really want to know what Konrad thinks, I've given a few cards here on this show here. But me and my mate, we break down the shows I've just spoken to. I'll be honest about where I was coming from, what I'm trying to get to. I can't say it's worth the money, but if you'd like to jump that paywall, that's the Substack I've got running there with a few people that are super keen over there. So I don't know how you'd find it. Just follow the links in Instagram and you'll find the subscribe there. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Konrad, thanks so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's always fun to have a chat and yeah, it's been really fun getting to know you a bit more and pick your brains, because I think what you're doing is wonderful. It's making this world a better place, having more people listen and understand and do that through you. I think if you can facilitate people doing that and help them along their way, that's a big thing. And so,
thanks so much, Phil. Thanks for your support. Love your work. I'm a big fan, so keep doing what you're doing. Thanks so much for the chat. I've loved every minute of it.
If you are deconstructing, there is no reason to do this alone. It can be an incredibly lonely process, but the deconstructionnetwork.com is a free resource to help you find others deconstructing in your local area. If you would like to support what I do, everything I do is for free, from talking to people for hours on end to producing resources and podcasts. It is only possible because people give generously. There's never any need to give. It will always be free, everything I do. But if you do, we do have an amazing private community group that we talk on over on Discord that you would gain access to. And we do regular audio and video chats on there as well. So it'd be great to see you in there. But of course, never any requirement. And of course, please, please, please come and talk to me on Instagram. I love connecting with people. I love helping people on their journey. If you need a safe space to process your deconstruction, I would love to connect. It's just @Phil Drysdale. Love every one of you. Peace.